gentlemen, please welcome Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson.
It's a huge pleasure to be here tonight, and as you might imagine, I'm going to talk about sports, and I've been very privileged to be involved in sport for lots and lots of years, both as a competitor and now as an administrator. I've got a few years before I turn into a grumpy old blazer. But sport's an amazing thing, and in 475 days we will see the opening ceremony of the Paralympic Games, and a bit before that we've got the warm-up event, the Olympics or something it's called. But for me, the opportunities I had through sport are absolutely amazing. I never thought as a young athlete that I'd have the chance to compete at 5 Paralympic Games. And to be honest, I've never quite figured out whether summing up 25 years of my athletics career into a 59-second DVD is good or not. But I was just hugely fortunate. I had some great coaches, some great training partners. And I look at that DVD and it brings back so many memories I always feel a bit like a Miss World contestant, kind of travelling the world and meeting nice people. But sports are an amazing way to kind of push your own boundaries and barriers, and also change people's ideas. When I look at that DVD, it brings back memories of winning and losing, and all sorts of other things. It also reminds me of how many truly awful haircuts I had. And I do need to explain one to you. It was the bob and the glasses. It was 1992, it was Barcelona. For me, it was a really good games. I won 4 gold medals, a silver, and broke 2 world records. You'd think that would be enough to keep your mother happy. No. My mum was great. She hated everyone who beat me. She only liked commentators when they said nice things about me. She didn't have a clue about the sport. My dad was really analytical, knew who everyone in the world was. But Mum didn't like watching me race. She used to get so nervous and stressed out, so she stayed at home during Barcelona, and the rest of my family came out and watched me compete live. And my first final was the 400 metres, and I won the gold, broke the world record. And I rang my mum to say, Mum, did you see the race on TV? Because my race was also shown live on the grandstand. And as an athlete, it's really cool. And my mum was just sort of a bit miserable, and she went, yeah, I saw it. Right, I won a gold medal. Did you see that bit? And she went, yeah, I saw it. So eventually I said, look, is there a problem? And what I didn't realise at the time was that as I'd gone out onto the track, I'd taken a mouthful of water and spat it out. And that was also shown live on TV. And my mum said, I suppose the race was okay, yeah, but I never want to see you spit in front of the BBC camera again. Thanks, Mum. I did say to her, what about an ITV one, but apparently that's different. Anyway. So it kind of goes to show, whatever you do in sport, you know, your family are always probably a bit strange, actually. But without my family and without the support I had, I wouldn't have had the opportunities to do the things that I did. And that's why, for me, sport is important. It's about giving young people the opportunity to try different things. I got involved with the bid for 2012 quite early on, when lots of people said we shouldn't bother because there was no chance we were going to win. And for me, it was just, if you don't try, you never know what you might achieve. My grandfather had a saying, which is a sort of bit of a family motto, which is aim high, even if you hit a cabbage. It's Welsh. And I would love to tell you it loses something from its translation from Welsh to English, but it's exactly the same. And there's loads of other versions of it around, but it's about having a goal and a dream and seeing what you can achieve. And I absolutely believe that in my athletics career, and I believed it with the Olympics and Paralympics as well. And then you just saw gradually over time, more and more people started believing that we could do it. And the whole attitude changed and everybody got behind it. And for me, being in Singapore was possibly one of the most emotional experiences of my entire life, because we had a chance to do something differently. And for when that announcement was made, I was sitting next to Seb at the time, and neither of us, we couldn't even pick up our glass of water because our hands were shaking so much. There were a couple of photographers in front of us, and it just seemed there was loads in front of Paris. And we didn't know, and we waited, and it just felt like we were being kept waiting for hours and hours and hours. And for that moment when Jack Rogg eventually opened the envelope and said London, we'd had a bit of a suggestion beforehand from some of the PR team. They said to us, whatever the outcome, could we turn towards Paris and politely applaud them? And we kind of missed that quite a lot, really, because we were there, and then you saw them cry, and there were bits which were really hard because they were absolutely devastated, so we turned that way to shout a bit. But for me, it's not just about hosting the games, it's about everything else that we can use the Olympic and Paralympic Games for, to try and change people's attitudes. And for that moment, it was absolutely incredible, because it just gives us a chance to inspire lots and lots of young people. Because I was inspired to do athletics. I watched the '84 Olympics, I watched Seb, and it was LA, and I also watched the men on the space packs as they came into the opening ceremony, and I thought they were really cool. And I remember that one of the commentators saying, you know, in 20 years from now we'll all be flying around on space packs. Yeah, okay. But that was a kind of a turning point in my life, because I'd always been very involved in sport, very sporty family. My mother brought me up to believe that Gareth Edwards is the closest thing to perfection that will ever walk this earth. I shouldn't say that in England, should I? But my parents encouraged me to do sport for several reasons. One was I was quite an annoying child, and I had lots and lots of energy, and was a bit irritating. And the other one was because I was in a wheelchair. My dad was an architect. He realised the world wasn't a terribly accessible place. And I remember him, I became a wheelchair user at 7. I remember him getting a book out and showing me these pictures of all these amazing places around the world. And there was the Taj Mahal, and there was the Sydney Opera House. And I remember him saying to me, Tanni, you need to explore, you know, you shouldn't let anyone think differently of you because you're in a wheelchair. That's their problem, that's not your problem. And if you want to kind of do all these amazing things, you need to be fit and strong to do it. And that was the main reason that my parents encouraged me to do sport. My dad was really ill last year, and I kind of got to that point where I wanted to say thank you to him, because that was a real turning point in my life. And I said to him, Dad, do you remember that time when you told me I needed to be fit and strong and I needed to travel the world? And he went, no. Oh, great. So, you're ruining the moment, Dad. And I said, do you remember? You know, you got the book out, and he sort of went, oh, yeah, I do. And he said, actually, your mother and I didn't want you living at home forever. Which, my family are great. They are just... when I told my dad I was going into the House of Lords, he said, are you sure they've got the right Tanni Grey-Thompson? Yeah, thanks, Dad. But if I'd taken something different from my dad's comments at that point, my life would have been really different. And I was just hugely fortunate that my parents just saw the positive benefits for me for being involved in sport. And I do joke about it. I talk to lots of young athletes about what it takes to achieve, and you need some natural talent, and you need to train, and you need to be educated, and I am turning into my father with that, because, you know, education gives you choices. Oh, here we go again. But for me, it was, from the age of 13, every decision I made was based around being an athlete. I went to Loughborough University because of sport. It dictated who I married. Ian did eventually ask me out, and he was an athlete, so he understood about what I was trying to do. His proposal was very romantic. It was, are we getting married or what? You've got an hour before I'm going training if you want an engagement ring. Thank you. Our wedding was based on a competition schedule. I did think at one point that I could actually do a race on the day I got married. That might have been why we picked May the 1st, because there was a big track meet on in Cardiff. My mother actually got me banned from the race and threatened the race organiser. So for our honeymoon, we went on a Swiss training camp in Zurich. We think this is all completely fine and normal. I'm not sure it's quite normal. If I had £1 for every time somebody said to me, oh, is it very glamorous? No. I spent the vast majority of my life traipsing up and down the trunk road where I live, covered in snot. And then you get those moments where, you know, you're competing in Sydney or Atlanta or you know, Athens or Beijing or wherever it is. It's a truly special moment. But for the guys who've got the opportunity to compete on the track and the pool, whatever it is, in 2012, it will be something different again. To compete in the Games on home soil will be absolutely amazing. It will change the lives of so many elite athletes, but it will also change the lives of lots of other young people, because they will look at the athletes competing and think, do you know what, Victoria Pendle can do it, you know, if Chris Hoy can do it, if, you know, Jess Ennis can do it, I can do it as well. And for me, that's something that's really important about winning the Olympics and Paralympics, that we can inspire young people to do sport or art or whatever it is. It's about using everything that the Games can bring to this country to make a real difference to other young people's lives. Winning the Games was amazing, just so emotional. I have to say, possibly the second most exciting thing in my life also happened in Singapore. Singapore wasn't great for wheelchair access. I had to be carried up and down flights of stairs. and I had to go to a meeting, and there wasn't a lift. And Steve Redgrave, the rower, poor love, he's carried me up and down loads of flights of stairs. And when he was rowing, when he was, you know, in sort of his best physical shape ever, he used to be able to carry me on his own up and down flights of stairs. He used to just put his arm underneath the frame of my chair and lift the back bar and just carry me. In Singapore, what I think he said to me was he wasn't as fit as he used to be. It might have come out as you're not as skinny as you used to be. I'm sure he meant to say it differently. So he had to ask for some help to carry me up the stairs. And he just said, "Oi, Dave, can you give me a hand?" Anyway, it was David Beckham. So they carried me up the flight of stairs. I was very calm. I said, "Thanks, guys, really appreciate it." Went straight to the toilets to ring my best friend. And be really honest, how many of you here wouldn't do the same? And then I rang my dear husband, because I thought he should know. And I was like, "Steve and David just carried me up a flight of stairs." And my husband said to me, he said, "Do you realise something, Tanni?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You're probably the cheapest woman Beckham's ever picked up." No, my husband's very quick. Like, "Thank you, darling. It's a good job I am in Singapore right now." But through sport, I've had the chance to do lots and lots of other things, again, which I never would have ever dreamt possible. I never ever thought I'd be in the House of Lords. Actually, I did a politics degree at that wonderful seat of political learning, Loughborough University. I spent quite a lot of time trying to do that. Boo? Oh, dear me. I remember in my final year, my head of department saying to me, "Are you ever going to go into politics?" And I said, "No, of course not. I'm going to go and do something, you know, really good. I'm going to go off and be an athlete. Politics is for losers." Yeah, because everyone else from my course went into politics. When it was announced I was going into the Lords, my professor is still alive. And he sent me a very nice email which just had loser on it and nothing else. Thank you very much, Professor Burkitt. I love you too. Other things I've got to do, which all kind of a bit, you know, just a bit daft really. Got to be on a Question of Sport. I've been on it 5 times. I'm not quite on the biggest losing team ever. My first time on was with Bill Beaumont and Frank Bruno. We were so bad. For years, people would come up to me in the street and just say, "You were really bad on Question of Sport," which is why I wasn't glad I wasn't answering the questions tonight. Other things I've got to do, I've got to be on the weakest link. And that's really cool. Voting people off is just really good. Because it's the kind of, you're not really being really mean, but you kind of feel like you are. And it was a sports person's version, and they tried to get us to all gang up on each other, and actually, because we were all very competitive, we decided, and the money was for charity, we decided to kind of all work together, and we weren't going to kind of have any voting patterns. We were just going to be really straight about this, to just get as much money as possible. I got down to the final 3, and it was Matt Pinsent, the rower, Tracy Edwards, the optowoman, and myself. And you know, they keep you going for ages and ages and, you know, trying to kind of build up the tension. And eventually Anne Robinson said, we all voted each other, so it was all sort of a bit complicated. And Anne Robinson said to me, "Tanni, in the last round, you were the strongest link, you get to pick who goes." Right, okay. Really difficult because, you know, both Matt and Tracy are quite good friends, and Tracy's Welsh, and what do you do? But actually what it came down to is Matt had been a bit rubbish all the way through, and Tracy had been really good. So I got rid of Tracy. And at that point it was about the charity. And the question that lost me £21,500 for my charity was, name a Warwickshire town that's also a sport. Rugby. Oh, it's really easy when you're at home, isn't it? Yeah. So I sat there going, A, athletics, B, basketball, C. There was nothing in my head. I sat there for ages, and it was absolutely awful. Anyway, you know, you're thinking, oh, well, you know, it's only a quiz show and it's not that important. It was never a mistake to do it. The mistake I made was the day after it was shown on TV, going to my local supermarket, because literally every single person who walked past me said, "You are the weakest link, goodbye."